and to Andrew, monitoring things sound-wise and visually as well. So wave and shout out to everybody watching now as well on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for your company here. Thank you to all who are listening in. Nice to have you with us. And as always, please do share, please do interact, and please do feel very much part of the programme. Even if you're watching back later or listening back later as well, text us on 089 467 2000. Email us info@radiomaria.ie and telephone the studio here 014 123 456. We always like to hear from you. And again, if you're in the north or outside of Ireland, +353 in front of those numbers to get in touch with us. 89 467 2000 is the text on WhatsApp. 014 +353 14 123 456. Not difficult at all. Looking forward to our trip, please God, to the southwest of Ireland tomorrow. Bit of a hike actually down from Dublin down to Kerry. Cork is a couple of hours, I suppose, of a drive, a little bit more. But it's a straight run. Where the studio is here in Ballymount, it's actually a great location, looking literally out the window at the Red Cow Hotel. So we just leave the building, the car park, turn left, you're literally 50 yards from the traffic lights, and at that traffic lights you have it's like a five-way junction, the Naas Dual Carriageway, M50 South, Naas Dual Carriageway South or North is the middle one, and the other one is the M50 North. Of course, the Naas Dual Carriageway coming from the city is to the right then, so it's going to be a five-way junction. It was perfect. So the first couple of times you have to really be sharp pulling out of that junction to know which exit do I want, where am I going exactly. Because the M50 South side of it splits into two and it goes back into the Naas Dual Carriageway North as well, so or east, I suppose. Anyway, it's a great location because you're just out the door and you're on the road. So it's about 2 hours, 2.25 hours ish to Cork City down the motorway, and from Cork City then Google Maps tells me it's another hour and 3/4, maybe 2, probably depending on towns and villages on the way down, but down to Kenmare right under the southwest corner of Ireland there. And you could go still further. In fact, I'd say it'd be another hour's drive maybe to head off if you want to get the tip of the country down there as well. Is it Mizenhead? Is that it? Mallinhead to Mizenhead. That Mallinhead is up in the north and Mizenhead way down in the southwest. These are the weather forecasting locations. So when you get the southwest tip of Ireland, you know what weather's coming for the rest of the country more often than not, because the prevailing wind from the Atlantic being from the southwest, of course. So we're looking forward to our trip to Kenmare. We'll be in Dowris Church at 6 p.m. with God's help tomorrow evening, and we'll take a run into Kenmare then for the 7:30 Mass and meet and greet people down there. So again, if you're local and nearby, let us know. Eamonn O'Sullivan just popped his head around the door as well. He'll actually be in Kenmare himself, he said, early next week. And Eamonn is kind of a go-getter. He's the man, some of you may know him, who has been around the country for years and years installing EWTN sort of home satellites. Ever before, I think satellite dishes were a thing or being seen much mounted on houses and that. So Eamonn has done that work for years and years and still potters around in all kinds of interesting telecommunications. But he said he's down in the vicinity, and if it is there's anyone in that neck of the woods who has difficulty with signal and setup, let's say, by way of technology, he's your man. So he'll be down in Kenmare Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Just a little shout out for Eamonn. And if you want to give us your number and you have signal problems, satellite dish problems, all of that kind of stuff, he'll be happy to troubleshoot and see can he fix things for you. And as I say, Eamonn's been for years going around fixing up EWTN connections for people, and a few Radio Maria connections as well, for those who find all that stuff just a little bit too much. So as I say, he'll be in Kenmare, so we might give it a mention when we're down there, and he's doing a job or two down that way. So we won't actually meet him because he's down there on the Monday, but he said, look, let people know. So there you go. So on the Sunday then we'll be at 9 a.m. Mass in Kenmare, 10:30 Mass in Kilgarvan, and 12 noon Mass in Kenmare as well. So 5 Masses between tomorrow night and Sunday morning with God's help. And thanks very much indeed to Father George Hayes, the parish priest there, and to Father John Cairns, who is one of the priests in the neighbouring kind of cluster of parishes, is how Kerry are administering things for long since now. They've had to combine parishes and priests and somehow set the masses, step them apart so that they can cover for each other if one or other is off sick. And poor Father Cairns was laid low with the virus last year, I think, sometime, and swore by Radio Maria ever afterwards. A big fan, great listener, and thanks for that shout out, Father Cairns. And just loving and appreciating very much all the prayer and the chat and really the work we're doing in Radio Maria, which is, one, again, as I've often mentioned, one of my great ambitions for our work here, to be of particular support to priests in their ministry. Again, just as an instrument. There's lots of other instruments, of course, too, but my hope, as always, that the radio would be there for them and for their dear parishioners and friends too, for all of you, as an instrument to help you on your path, your journey to really to holiness, and hopefully helping you in your life in the parish. I would certainly very much hope that Radio Maria wouldn't be in any way, shape, size or form taking away from the life of the parish and your involvement in your parish. Rather the very opposite, that it would be again a source of formation for you as well as the parish, because we all need that, knowing well that in any parish situation there's only so much I've often experienced that I could do as a priest by way of providing the sacraments for the community, and there's only so many people you can meet with and talk with and share with every day, and the little moments of homilies or homilets that are allowed, that you can reasonably engage with, let's say, just provide a limited enough framework by way of ongoing formation, whereas something like the radio here just enables a more solid relationship, if you like, by way of journeying in faith and fellowship. And that's important. The whole question of fraternity and fellowship in faith is a very, very important thing, which is why Sunday, as a day of rest and as a day of coming to Mass in your community, and even the weekdays too, is that it's very important that we journey together. We're not isolated, we're not alone. We know a great deal about these things. We've experienced it so much now. That journeying together in faith is crucial. And just a little shout out again to the Exodus 90, which starts on Monday, and the last knockings now the last couple of days, if you're interested in signing up for that. If you want to send us in your details, we can pass them on to Father Marius. There is a group there. If you're interested in some a tough 90 days for men, it's for men. So a tough 90 days of prayer and of fasting. It's kind of like an early Lent in many ways. And some of the austerities, if you like, are tough enough. Talking about cold showers every day, a holy hour of prayer certainly every day, and then abstaining from snacks between meals, giving up all the sweet things, alcohol, television, movies, and unnecessary time on computers and phones and social media and all that stuff. So really cutting out a whole tranche of the kind of things that we men get so easily engaged with and distracted by, and instead reintroducing fraternity in a small group of 5 or 7 they recommend. I've never done this before, so it's a new departure for me now as well, having a go at this, and then working together and praying together and keeping each other accountable and proving to one another that we cannot do it on our own. That's life for sure. I cannot do this by myself. We have to fall back on God and allow our faith to strengthen us to be the men we are called to be, especially fathers of families, husbands to their wives and children, and indeed all men, priests of course, to their parish and their community and their ministry, to be better men. And I think it's a good call, a timely call, in a world that has sort of emasculated men somewhat and alienated men even at times too, and a world that's maybe a little bit over-dominated at times by a kind of spirit that denounces men or denigrates them or kind of pushes them to the background a little bit. That's not a good thing. There needs to be good balance. Not that, again, men are meant to lord it over or to... It's none of those things, and not to generate any kind of a patriarchal... This is one of the accusations made against the Church. That instead that we men are called to service, a giving of ourselves. And the ascetical practices then of the cold showers and the no snacking and cutting out all this media stuff. I think vigorous exercise, regular vigorous exercise, is in the the menu as well. These are good and healthy, and again, the purpose and direction is to bring men together. Men kind of do well when they're kind of challenged. There's a bit of competitiveness. For women, it's altogether different. The nature of sharing and fellowship, which is why this particular way of doing things is intended for men. To challenge them really and to bring out the best in them, but with a view not to self-glorification that I conquered this mountain, rather to prove to ourselves our need of God, our need of fellowship, and the challenge to us to become men of service and of self-sacrifice. It's written into our nature. So anyway, Exodus 90, look it up, Google it, and look up the website. There's lots of little videos and things online. But if you're interested in it, I can connect you in with the group, and we can get you set up for that if you'd like to as well. There seems to be a good bit of interest being generated for it. And fair play to Father Marius O'Reilly there. He's behind it, as indeed several other priests. Father Philip Kemmy up in Letterkenny, Donegal. Father Rory Brady is involved. Our old Father Jamie here in Dublin is involved as well. And Father Jim Lennon down in Kerry, he's in Killarney. Who else? There's one or two others, I think, around the country, the priests that have come to the fore. I wouldn't know all of them, but it's good to see. Again, the priests are there really as by way of spiritual direction, but it's lay-led, I think, is the idea, that it's led by the men themselves, So very good. Great that that's there as a positive initiative, as a way of journeying together. And again, this is my whole point really this morning, the idea of fellowship and of growing and sharing and working together in faith. Very, very important. So indeed, prayer, a key element of that journey, and something that we all know. I mean, I'll come out with my hands up there, would love to have or be able to, well, maybe it's wrong, I suppose, I'm just thinking it through my head a little bit, to achieve certain goals, say, in prayer, but to have a well-structured life of prayer is the thing. And that, we mark the times for prayer well. So, for instance, on a Sunday is a day of rest, yes, but a day, when we're expected to go to Mass, obviously, but to spend time with the Lord, it's the Lord's day. And so we might engage in some charitable activities, certainly, but maybe also, not maybe, just maybe, but to be a time of a deeper prayer and reflection and of time spent with the Lord, with Scriptures say, certainly in the Lord's presence, coming a little earlier for Mass, maybe leaving a little later, allowing ourselves that extra space for prayer, or a visit to a church as part of the day, given that it's a free day. Go out for a stroll, go out for a walk, pop into a cemetery, pray there. It's all a very noble and lovely thing to do as well. But in church, likewise, to pray too. So that's a good reminder for us to be aware of our need, indeed, to keep an eye on prayer. Now, Lent, I suppose, isn't starting until is it March the 2nd? So this Exodus 90 is kind of getting ahead of it, really, and 90 days seems an awfully long time for it too, So very good. Just to throw that open and throw that out to you. Lovely gospel today. Actually, lovely readings. Interesting readings at Mass today. The Samuel, we've been reading from the first book of Samuel and hearing about Samuel as the prophet. And now here he is, and the people are confronting him and want him to appoint a king. And this is the beginnings, as it were, of the period of the kings. You have the first book of Kings, the second book of Kings, and it's King Saul who is anointed the first king of Israel. The Israelites wanted to have a king. But through Samuel, they are warned that, well, if you opt for a king, you opt for a monarch and a monarchy, they will draw and have expectations and draw from the life of the people, and would tap into the best of everything, taxing the people, taking the best of their sons and daughters to serve at court, and their chariots and the charioteering that would go on. The young girls taken for perfumery and and baking and these other areas of expertise into the royal court, of course. And then that their animals, their livestock, their produce would all be taxed for the realm and the sake of the king, and that the king would be, again, have to be served, and that they would be subservient to him. And yet the people still insist, no, we want a king. We want what we want, because there are other nations around us, they all have kings, so we want one too. And so the Lord, through Samuel, tried to warn them that you would have to deal with the vicissitudes and the weaknesses of human nature that would accompany any kind of regal expression of authority, and the demands that would place upon the state. But they said, no, we want somebody to lead us into battle, somebody who will, represent us. But a human representative will always be fallible. We know that well. Politics teaches us that. If we learn anything from election to election, our elected representatives, it's not easy or not difficult at times to find them wanting. And yet perhaps we're too easy to find them wanting, too quick perhaps at times. When I've been praying at Mass the last couple of mornings for civil servants in general, that an awful lot of good work is done on behalf of the citizens of the country through our elected representatives and through our civic representatives that might never be spoken of or go unacknowledged. Even the simple things, I think of the librarians and those cleaning the streets, all those, of course, who work in the health services, they're all servants of the state too. Peacekeepers, the Garda Síochána. There's such a lot of wonderful, wonderful work goes on as the fruit of our taxes that are paid. And perhaps we don't acknowledge that or appreciate that enough. And we pray every blessing on our dear civil servants who do, various departments, Department of Fisheries, agriculture. What good work must not go on there in just mediating and applying the laws of the land and European laws and all these things that they have to do to keep things running as they ought to. Not a pleasant task, I don't think, on the whole. And the great security, I suppose, and the the work the civil servants do very often is kind of quite monotonous. Social welfare, all these various departments. When you begin to put it down on paper, begin to talk it out a little bit, there's a lot of people who work in the state and for the state and do tremendous good. So far too easily can we begin to find fault, and I suppose the politicians are in the front line, so they get the brunt of it. I couldn't do that job. I don't know how they do it. It's a certain personality, I'm sure. So the people of Israel, as we'll see, won't be slow to find fault with the king when he finally comes around. And we know the story. We've got details certainly of King Saul and his successor, King David. And can you name David's successor? His son through Bathsheba, King Solomon, a man of great wisdom indeed. So we are familiar with three of the kings already, but each of them in turn let the side down. Each of them, again, their human weakness prevailed at times. King David noted indeed for his repentance, and that ties in nicely with today's gospel and the forgiveness of sins. And that lovely Psalm 50 that we pray, and that's often sung, the Miserere, beautiful psalm. Have mercy on me, God, in your kindness and your compassion. Blot out my offence. O wash me more and more from my guilt, and cleanse me from my sin. Every Friday morning in the morning prayer, we're reminded of that as a kind of weekly penitential expression, that Psalm of King David. And as a king, indeed, his weakness is lust, and indeed is trying to cover up for it afterwards, murdering Uriah, the Hittite, who was Bathsheba's husband. Crime after crime there. And she conceived, and the child was lost. And later she did conceive again when she became his wife. And Solomon, her son, then was who succeeded David on the throne as king. But Solomon, in all his wisdom, he fell victim indeed to all his concubines, and again let the side down somewhat too. And his successors, I don't think, did a great job. There was even more problems ensued. So the era of the kings is very interesting. So what we learn from that, I hope, and the point I was making a little bit earlier too at Holy Mass, there is only one king and only one Lord, only one ruler, and that is the Lord Jesus. He is the true King of kings, Lord of lords. So it is indeed that we learn perhaps that our human frailty, again like the Exodus 90 journey, is an attempt to help us men realize how frail and weak and helpless we really are, and yet the calling that is ours to greatness, but not earthly achievement or self-aggrandizement. And this is true for all of us. It doesn't, not just the men, but I suppose if we're focusing on kings there. So how do you become a king? How do you behave as Lord and still exercise sanctity? Well, the Lord himself teaches us, you call me Lord, and so I am, but I have come not to be served, but to serve, and to lay down my life. So this is holiness, the laying down of our lives. So in other words, self-sacrifice for the love of God and for the good of others. That's another way of expressing the life of holiness or sanctity. And what these days of prayer and fasting for the Exodus 90 lads anyway is trying to do is to help bring that realization about that there's no glory without the cross, there's no crown without the thorns. Christ is the King. He's the one who teaches us and shows us the way, what it means to serve rather than to be served. And there it is. That's how, and we can read through the Old Testament then and see that at work. And so it is that the four men who bear the paralytic on the stretcher find the house too crowded. They can't get in the door. It's just mobbed to get near Jesus. But their faith and their determination makes them persevere and hang in there. And so they get on the roof and they rip back the roof. And the guy who owned the house must have been well upset that his roof was being... He said, hey, you better fix that when you're done, lads. Do you mind? That's my roof. I need to stay here tonight. And they lower him in. And Christ himself, of course, uses it as a marvellous teaching moment. The scribes and the Pharisees, they have these thoughts in their hearts. Who can forgive sin but God alone? So what the Lord uses the moment, he says, your sins are forgiven you. And the cripple must have been, well, maybe he knew, maybe his paralysis was as a result of some folly of his. Or maybe not, we're not told. And some follies, maybe some sinful folly, I don't know. But that the Lord forgave his sins sets the scene for those onlookers to say, well, who can forgive sins but God alone? So if they wanted proof of his authority as God, to prove to you, and he describes himself as the Son of Man, to prove to you that the Son of Man has power to forgive sins, I tell you, get up, pick up your stretcher and go off home, which the man immediately does, which must have been a sort of shock moment for everybody there. And what answer could the scribes and Pharisees make? But the Lord wasn't seeking so much to confound his opponents, rather to demonstrate his authority as Son of God and the great necessity for mercy and the forgiveness of sins, and the power of intercessory prayer and intercessory action. So those four men who brought the cripple on the stretcher to the Lord, we've experienced that here in the studio, where those who are really struggling with addiction and burdened with life's problems, being brought for prayer, being brought for intercession, being brought for confession. And we're seeing before our very eyes, indeed, the very same deliverance and reconciliation and peace, the very same thing, because these souls have been brought to Christ, who is the source of all grace and all mercy. So it's a lovely scene, that gospel scene. It's one well worth sitting with and dwelling upon, and imagining yourself as one of the onlookers in the house there, and seeing and listening to the Lord and being amazed at his teaching and his authority and his wisdom and his replies, a bit like the 12-year-old Jesus in the temple. The doctors there were amazed at his intelligence and his replies. And so it must have been a kind of a jaw-dropping experience to sit there and just marvel at this teaching and this wonder, and then to see this drama unfolding. I mean, high drama when the roof of the house is being torn apart and there's great commotion going on, and how will the Lord react to this? And we see him depicted in movies, and I'm sure it must be quite accurate, quite calmly through it all, and maybe smiling to himself and seeing it again as a lovely opportunity to see the faith of the people and those carrying the stretcher, and then the joy and the rejoicing in the man who is suddenly healed. And he goes off home, and everybody's looking at him saying, don't need the stretcher anymore, don't need your help to minister to me anymore. I'm good to go. And what must not that man have done and said ever since? His life utterly changed, utterly transformed, must surely have brought that good news to anybody and everybody he met on the way home, at home, and ever after. So, he might have said, look, hey, see the stretcher? These lads carried me up here in the stretcher. Here I am, Jesus of Nazareth. He's the man. Go see him. You got problems? Go to him. You can just imagine his enthusiasm and zeal ever since. And indeed all the people who may well have heard about it afterwards and out of curiosity would want to have come to meet him and say, oh, you're the guy who's been paralyzed for, what on earth happened? Tell us the story. And you see, the point I'm making there is that it's the very same for us when we are healed of our paralysis in sin. Why would we not want then to go and tell others and to share the story with others and to be enthusiastic and joyful and cheerful about it, and whoever we can find who is willing to listen, let them hear the story. And so for all of us then, animated by our faith and at the receiving end of this kind of mercy and deliverance and release from the paralysis of sin, which of course is far worse than physical paralysis or physical ailments. We make such a fuss and bother at times about physical health, and true enough, I mean, we're right. That's why we have hospitals and doctors and nurses. That's why we have, again, all the measures that are taking place in relation to the virus and so on. And we go to such an extent, and we get ourselves, quite worked up and animated about these things and informed about these things. How much more so should we do so in relation to sin and the paralysis of evil and all these other things that afflict us perhaps far worse because they're a spiritual malady and a spiritual paralysis. All the more so that we should exercise ourselves and energize ourselves to rid ourselves of the paralysis of sin, sloth, pride, anger, envy, lust, greed, gluttony. Again, this is where the Exodus 90, I suppose, is stepping in and saying, look, discipline in order to get rid of the sloth, get rid of the self-indulgence, and begin to grow in virtue. So in other words, diligence, patience, chastity, let me think of the opposite, say, of greed and gluttony, self-control, temperance, these virtues instead. And that's my selling point all the time for confession, that it's an exercise not in self-condemnation so much, I must indeed confess my sins, rather in the life that the paralytic lived ever after. It's about freeing us from this bondage of self and self-glorification to be free for service, to be free for self-giving in some way. And that's what deliverance from sin allows us to, because we break from our selfishnesses and grow in selflessness. And to see confession in that light, not as an ordeal to be gotten through, I suppose again the penances and so on, they're an ordeal in their own way. But if we can rise above the sense of seeing these things as an ordeal, rather as a transformative, a means towards transformation, a means of putting away the stretcher and no longer being so much of a burden to others or on others because of my sins, but instead being a source of help and solidarity and hope and uplift to others instead, to serve. So that's a beautiful gospel story, and as I say, well worth dwelling on and reflecting on in our own lives and our own journey, and as we grow together in faith too as well. So very good. Pat and Breda says thanks for praying for us civil servants. Absolutely, I know an awful lot of people in the civil service. And in fact, one of the greatest civil servants of all, at least in my view and my opinion, was Frank Duff. And I like to think of him as God's civil servant. Is there another way of describing that? Maybe there's another little catchphrase that, servants of the poor, servants of the needy. So it's true indeed. We have marvellous servants of the state who do untold and uncalculated amount of good work indeed. So to really acknowledge that. So thanks to Vincent, thanks to Brenda and Nancy as well. Lovely to have you all watching in on Facebook here, and thank you, Nancy. She's has lit a candle in the church for us, so delighted with that, Nancy. Great to light a candle. We have a candle lighting behind us here as well. Now a nice little piece of music lined up for us. Andrew's on the mixing desk. Eric Essenvals, if I'm even pronouncing that halfway right there, Andrew. Lux Eterna, which means eternal light. So it's I think it's a lovely antiphon, I think, or maybe it's a little bit of one of the Psalms, eternal light or eternal light shine on them. Maybe it's the Requiescat in Patcham, that one. So please do get in touch, drop a comment, like, share, follow, subscribe on the social media end of things, and we love to see those. Text us again on 089 467 2000. Email info@radiomaria.ie and give a call. Curdlech Oring on telephone 014 123 456. So back very shortly after this nice piece of music. Now there you are, the Requiem performed at Knock Shrine, the national, what was it again, Andrew? The national mass, the memorial mass.
Memorial.
That's it, yeah. Thanks, Andrew. Well done. Yeah. It's a nice, lovely piece of music there, and a beautiful a cappella singing there. So very good. Thanks indeed for that, Andrew. And thank you indeed. I see some lovely messages coming into our feedback group there. And if I'm not mistaken, indeed, another candle being lit for us there in St. Eunan's Church. And what is that? The St. Eunan's Cathedral there in Letterkenny. Sister Mary, it says here. So thanks for that too. That's very nice. Thank you for the prayers and the support. That really means a great deal. And we're very grateful to you for that as well. So very good. So do please again get in touch with us. If you're listening in later on, of course, as well, or watching later, by all means, absolutely do please get in touch with us. Shout out to Michael down in Bantry, and he's very grateful for the lovely calendar that he's received as well. So there are still a scatter of calendars left. We'll take a job batch with us down to Kenmare at the weekend as well. And we'll be in Escara Parish in Cork the following weekend. We'll bring a job lot of calendars, if there's any left, with us. And all must go. Lash to the calendars now. You've got to, that's the calendars. No, I'm getting the accent wrong. I was trying it yesterday as well. It wasn't working. So if you'd like us to send you on any one or two, please do get in touch with us. We'll gladly put them in the post to you to share around with your friends and get the word out. We're so glad indeed that around 5,000 calendars that we ordered are pretty much all gone scattered to the four ends of Ireland and further afield. So very glad indeed of that. So let us know if you would like to receive them. Very good. Let me just have a quick little run through here now as well. No, I don't think there's anything else I need to share with you there. Very good. I see that the Vatican has announced for the Jubilee year 2025 a motto. He's given his approval for the theme Pilgrims of Hope. I like that. That's a nice little expression there. And the Jubilee year is concluding, I think, the synodal conversations that are being had and are continuing to help, I suppose, engage the all in the church in the life and mission moving forward in the life of the church. So I do hope that something is happening by way of conversation and dialogue and interaction in your local parish too. It's something we must bring to the microphone a little bit more here as well, just mindful of that and our duty certainly in support of the church here in Ireland too. We should be engaging in some level of conversation. I suppose we are every day in a certain respect, but maybe focused towards the synod and the synodality that we are celebrating. So the Archbishop Fisichella, he's the president for the Pontifical Council for Promoting the New Evangelization. He explains the motto, Pilgrims of Hope, is seeking to condense the meaning of the entire Jubilee journey. That the words represent key themes for Pope Francis's pontificate, the idea of journeying, I suppose, and together, again, that theme that we've just been chatting about, really, solidarity and communion, fraternity, but also there's hope. There's much work to be done in these 2 years, excuse me, he said, referring to the Council for Promoting the New Evangelization that he heads, and entrusted with organising responsibility for the event of the Jubilee year. He says it is to have a solid preparatory impact in order to create an efficient organisational machine. Interesting choice of words there. That's a reading from the VaticanNews.va is where this is coming. I suppose it's ever new that the work of evangelization, speak of the new evangelization, it's always good to have a deadline or a project or a theme again, or like a Jubilee year, to just animate the work and to help it to move forward again with strength, you know. One of the priorities concerns the reception of pilgrims of the faithful, with a large number of pilgrims expected in Rome during the Holy Year, in the hope that in the next 2 years the health emergency will no longer affect activities as it does today. And I think we're seeing a certain amelioration of some of that as time goes on. There's a reduction, I think, in the number of days of isolation now for those who are close contacts. So it seems as if there's a balance is being established, which we hope indeed will help to open up interaction once again at safe levels. So that's certainly the hope moving forward with as we've come to understand the pandemic and the virus and everything else as well. So following the extraordinary 2015 Holy Year of Mercy, if you remember that's 7 years ago now, the forthcoming Jubilee will take place in line with the norm of leaving a 25-year gap between each one. The most recent ordinary Jubilee took place in the year 2000 as the world and the Catholic Church prepare to enter the new millennium. So a Holy Year every 25 years seems like a reasonable interval, I suppose. It's a generation, maybe, is it? And if you remember, the Holy Door was open. There's a door in St. Peter's in Rome which they opened specially for the Holy Year, and that you pass through the Holy Door. I think I did during that year. Can't recall. I'm pretty sure I did. A couple of times in and out of St. Peter's Basilica. And I think in cathedrals too there was a special door was marked for the Jubilee, the millennium. In cathedrals and dioceses around the country, a door was marked as a holy door through which people could pass also by way of making a pilgrimage to their cathedral church and allowing people to receive the Jubilee year indulgence as well. No doubt that will be part of the Holy Year in 2025 as well. It's here in front of me. I've anticipated it. I hadn't read ahead. That the rite of the opening of the Holy Door at St. Peter's Basilica will inaugurate the Holy Year, and after that the holy doors of the other papal basilicas are opened and remain so until the end of the Jubilee year. So that's St. John Lateran Basilica, St. Paul outside the walls, and St. Mary Majors. They're the big basilicas in Rome. So it may well be indeed that our cathedral churches do the same as well. So that's something to look forward to. Now 2025, Pilgrims of Hope for a Jubilee year. And indeed all of these marks and occasions are indeed great moments to celebrate our faith. You know, a bit like I'm saying, I suppose, in relation to our civil servants, maybe we should celebrate all that great work that goes on and enunciate it, maybe, articulate it by way of saying, look at all this great work that continues. And it's true in the life of the church. There is marvellous work continuing all the while, and a Jubilee year is a way of thanking God for the blessings and fruitfulness and gift of our faith and the blessings it's bringing to so many. As we're seeing as we travel around parishes, we enjoy certainly visiting parishes with Radio Maria, and we're looking forward to a visit to Downpatrick. We've a few parishes lined up, I think, in Ardagh and Clonmacnoise. Kevin Wynne has been busy there too. And I think a trip to Sligo is in the offing as well. This is certainly the good news that's coming through from Ruth's there. Hopefully with fixed dates for all of these. We'll be really belting around the country at an awful rate, please God, in the weeks ahead. So celebrating indeed the gift of our faith as we do here every day on Radio Maria. Thank you for your company through this Chatechesis. Lovely to have you with us. Thanks again to Andrew and Nuria looking after the technology end of things for me too. It's just coming up to 12 o'clock now. Please stay